Welcome to the Soul Seeker podcast. I'm your host, Sam Kabert. I started this pod back in 2019 when I was taking my first steps on the path of remembering. And at the time, the tagline for the show was a journey of self-discovery. A year later, it became a journey of remembering. Yet what I know now is back then I was still seeking. And what I've come to know now is that it's the journey of seeking that brings us the silent, slow stillness of acceptance. And therein lies our own innate wisdom. It's my mission now to eradicate the glorification of hustle culture, as it was my drive in entrepreneurship that led to a greater whole, and that's because I was outsourcing my sovereignty rather than looking within. So let this be your invitation to take a deep breath in and remember that at any time we can shift our thoughts and our feelings to create the outer world in which we wish to live. Soul Seekers, it's time to grow. Let's go. Here we are again for another episode of the Soul Seeker podcast. I am your host, as always, Sam Kabert, and today I'm sitting down with Nicholas Whitaker. But before we get into the show, as always, we're going to take just 3 simple breaths, because most of us just move through our day without taking any intentional and conscious breaths. So Nicholas, for you, for me, for all of you out there in listening land, I always invite you to breathe with us. Just be mindful if you're going to close down your eyes or not, right? Pretty obvious stuff there. So Nicholas, for you, for me, and everyone listening, if you are in a space to close down your eyes, I invite you to do so, sitting straight up, finding a natural pause after your next exhale, and slowly through the nose, inhaling all the way up. At the top of the breath, sipping in a bit more air, and a big audible sigh. Again, slowly through the nose, inhaling up, allowing the belly to expand, bringing that breath all the way up. And at the top of the breath, through the nose, sipping in a bit more. This time we'll hold the breath just for a moment. And audible sigh, letting it go. Last one, inhaling through the nose. Sipping in a bit more at the top. And sighing it out. Letting the breath return to its natural state and rhythm, flickering the eyes back open, and here we are. Nicholas, welcome to the show, the Soul Seeker Show, and I'm really excited to hear your story, chat with you, learn all the things about the Rebellion Collective and the quiet rebellion going on. So with that, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to pause there. I've been going myself back-to-back calls today, and I just got off of a group call just a little bit ago, which we also spent a good amount of time pausing, but I was facilitating, so it's always nice to have somebody else facilitate for me.
Totally. I can respect that and understand that. So if someone is just getting to know you for the first time, like, introduce how you got here today, maybe from the corporate lens. I know you have a tech background and got into mindfulness there. Let's just catch up to speed where you were, how you got involved with that, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, I would even take it back a step further. Well, first of all, Sam, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me. Yeah. I kind of joke a little bit. Like, I worked in big tech, worked at Google for 13 years. I call that the blip on the radar, the anomaly. It was actually a third of my career, but, a lot of people might over-index on that being kind of like the big marquee moment within my career. And actually, before that, I had my own business for almost a decade. I did video production and photography in New York City. I did a lot of work with nonprofits, government agencies, NGOs. And 2008, 2010, economic crash wreaked havoc on the video production industry in New York. There was some other technological advancements that happened at the same time that just took the margins right out from underneath us. And I got a tap on the shoulder from a buddy of mine. He was like, "Hey, I know you're a professor." I was also teaching at the time. He's like, "Would you be interested in doing some video production for Google?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course I would. That'd be great." And what was supposed to be a short-term project or short-term gig, I blinked and 13 years went by. And to me, like, the question of like how I got here to where I'm at right now, it was all the way at the beginning when I said yes to Google, my initial plan was, I'll just do it for a little bit of time. We'll see how it goes, take some money, stack some cash, go back into business for myself once all this like economic uncertainty clears up. And my thinking is like, while I'm there, I was like, oh, I'll treat it like an anthropological experiment. I'll research, I'll pay attention, I'll take good notes, I'll blog about it. None of that ended up happening. I got absorbed into the system, and that just became my world. And I had the real pleasure of working in a corner of the company that had me traveling around the world. I went to 52 countries, and over the period of 4 or 5 years, represented Google in front of news organizations around the world. I helped a lot of journalists figure out how to use digital tools for storytelling and news gathering, and I burnt out along the way. About 3 weeks out of the month, I'd be on the road. I kind of lost myself out there. And that was the beginning of what I'm doing now, was starting to realize like this push, hustle mentality, working in systems and in organizations that just keep extracting more and more from you. It's not sustainable. So I had to learn really quick how to stabilize myself and how to ground myself. And that's where mindfulness practice came in. That's where some of my journaling practices came in. And over time, I started codifying this into an actual system that worked really well for me, and then started working with other clients, supporting them through this. And then off, into the future, here we are now. And I've kind of created this into this whole, I don't know if you'd call it a movement necessarily yet, but this idea of quiet rebellion and the Rebellion Collective, which we can talk more about.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that you made mention to me previously was about high performers and how they're quietly unraveling. So maybe before, this is obviously leading into the rebellion aspect of it, but can you speak a little bit more to high performers and maybe, in my own words, wearing a mask of everything is okay, but underneath, kind of even they're not even aware of it a lot of times, that everything's unraveling. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, right?
Yeah. Well, it's the old pot and the boiling water analogy, and I think so many folks, look, some of these like larger companies, like big tech, they attract a certain type of person, high achieving, high performing. I call them mental athletes, and a lot of these folks, like, they have a mentality of achievement, whether that be, ranking up and climbing the ladder or stacking cash. Maybe it's the titles, that they're really after. Everyone has their own motivations, but by and large, a lot of the folks that I worked with, and I count myself among them, often that high performance turns into dysfunction. And it becomes a way of avoiding some of the other things in our lives that we aren't allowing ourselves the time to actually engage with, like our physical, mental, and emotional well-being, like our sense of purpose and our sense of meaning, and even at a core level, our identities. And we tend to over-identify with this idea of being a high performer or a high achiever. And what tends to happen, and this is the majority of the clients that I work with, that works for a while. Maybe in your 20s and 30s, you got the energy and the gumption to do that, and you can drive with that kind of energy. But over a while, in your 30s and your 40s, things shift. Your priorities shift, your needs shift, your body shifts, your hormones shift, and that constant pushing energy tends to have a deleterious effect on your body and on your well-being. And usually what happens is one of two things. Either people opt out and they bail and they blame themselves for not being able to hack it, or their body shuts down on them and it forces them to have to pause and reset and reckon with the way they've been behaving and the habits that they've been embodying. Or they start seeing it in other areas of their life. Their family life deteriorates, their relationships deteriorate. I talked to a lot of people that ended up self-medicating in multiple different ways in order to maintain the performance level that they're at. And then they end up in their late 40s or 50s feeling pretty hollow. And if they're lucky enough to get to retirement, they're left with this question of like, well, now what the fuck do I do? And like, who am I? Like, what do I actually want and what do I care about? So I try to get people a little bit further upstream before all that happens, to start asking these questions. And this is where the quiet rebellion comes in. It's not necessarily a rebellion against corporate America or a rebellion against work. It's like, we do live in a capitalist system. We have to navigate these waters in some way. But can we do it with a little bit more intention and a little bit more care, and treat ourselves as athletes and perform in a way that allows us to build in rest and build in recovery and all the things you would see like an Olympic athlete do.
Yeah, I love that. That's very similar to my own story of how I got here as well. And going through NLP, I was introduced to the concept of being, doing, having. The idea of like we start with who, getting clear on who it is, and being comfortable in the stillness is what I would add to it. Just presence, being energy, right? Then doing energy, us high performers, we're pretty good at that. We understand how to do something, and then we have the result. And then once we have that result, that end destination, we're uncomfortable with who we are, so we start the cycle again. Or actually, I was telling the right way to go about it. The wrong way to go about the way that I used to do it was doing, then have the result, then we would be at the being energy, and that's when we would be uncomfortable and start the cycle. There we go. That's what I meant to say. So yeah, that deeply resonates. In terms of what you're doing with or with the Rebellion Collective, tell us about that a bit.
Yeah, sure. So the work that I do kind of cuts across a few different modalities. A lot of the work I do is actually private coaching, one-on-one coaching with folks. And this is like what I call the deep end of the pool work. So it's not transactional. Like I can help you with certain things like prepping for an interview, or like, figuring out what career fit makes sense for you. That's not really the work I really enjoy working with people on. What I like to work with people on is like really getting a sense of like what their habits are, what their patterns are they serving them? What are the stories they're telling themselves? Like, how are they relating to their emotional and mental and physical experiences? Are they showing up with intention? And are they leading in a way that this world needs right now? We need more conscious leaders. We need more people that are grounded in their own experience and empathetic and compassionate to other people and being able to connect with them. So that's my private coaching, Quiet Rebellion. And again, it's kind of this quiet rebellion. We could talk more about like the history of that and where that actually comes from. The idea behind that is really like, can we allow ourselves to create boundaries? Can we create lines in the sand that allow us to create space to be able to understand who we are and what matters to us, and focus our attention and energy in a way that really helps serve that? Ultimately, to help serve the world and how to make the world a better place. But we can't do that if we're not grounded in our own experience. The Rebellion Collective is kind of the overarching umbrella. So it's both a community. We have just gotten off right before this call. I had one of my group coaching program sessions for that community. It's for high achievers and high performers who realize that the tools and skills that they've been leveraging so far are no longer working. And they want a space to be able to talk about these things honestly and openly. And be able to connect with other people that are also on that journey. A large number of the people that I talk to, they feel very alone and they feel very isolated. It's lonely at the top. You're making multiple six figures. There's guilt involved where it's like, oh, I'm struggling. Why shouldn't be struggling? Why am I struggling? So we turn inwards on ourselves and start eating ourselves up instead of looking at the system that we're in and noticing, well, it's like maybe the system that we're in isn't actually designed for us to be able to thrive. So how do we, with that awareness, build the skills, build the resources, build the community connection that we need to have true resilience? And this is kind of where we get into the difference between personal resilience and community resilience. Most resilience is talked about an internal individual resilience to recover from adversity. Well, what if we just allow ourselves to create systems that prevent us from having to recover in the first place? So that's what the Rebellion Collective is all about, bringing people together in community to learn these skills, to practice them in a sandbox, and then to learn what paths are most appropriate for them, whether that's going back into corporate with a different perspective, maybe it's downgrading or downshifting into a different pace at a different type of company or a different size company. Maybe it's an entrepreneurial endeavor. And those are the questions we're working on.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's so easy to get caught up in like just corporate, right? And go do your own things. It sounds so good in theory. And I think my younger self would, before I did deeper work on myself, would get very triggered, like hearing Gary Vee's work, where it's like, it's so easy to be an entrepreneur, quit your job and just do it, and then people just fall on their face. And I'm just like, oh man. So I think that's really important to understand too. Like it isn't necessarily the solution to just leave your corporate job or decide to be an entrepreneur on a whim. You haven't mentioned, but I'm curious, for the people you work with, is it gender neutral?
Yeah, it tends to be a broad group of folks, gender neutral, demographic neutral. I think the orientation is more towards the way, the worldview, and the awareness of the fact that the skills that they've used to get them to where they're at, to get to those high achieving roles, to be able to thrive in those environments. It's when they start to notice it unraveling, like those are my people. Interesting with coaching, I tend to notice there's a bit of a schism between folks that are attracted to coaching, and depending on how you talk about coaching or guiding or whatever the language is that you're using, it attracts different people. But I'd say as a whole, it's often people mid-30s or older, kind of splits almost evenly between men and women identifying folks. And it's usually people that have been in their career for about 5 to 10 years or longer. That's usually right around where the awareness starts to build. And they're like, oh, I don't know if I can keep doing this. The people I really love working with are the ones that are about 5 to 6 years out from retirement, and they're starting to feel it. And they're like, I don't know how to keep doing this. Like, I'm too young to retire, but I'm too old to know better at this point. So I need to figure something else out.
And for those people, let's zoom in on that a little bit there. What is one of the things that they are learning from the community at large that is really that aha that gives them that direction and clarity?
Yeah, I think it's a reorientation towards capacity. So this is a language and a word that I've been using quite a bit over the last few years, over and over and over again when I talk to people. We name it as burnout. And there's a lot of different ways of thinking about burnout. I think burnout is really more of a systemic problem of our culture these days. It's built into the culture. It's built into the companies that we work at. And then we internalize it as a personal failing. I've burnt out. And it's like, nah, you haven't burnt out. The society has burnt you out. It's pushed you past your capacity. And as high performers and high achievers, we tend to override that instinct of self-preservation. It's like, oh, if I just work harder, if I just put more hours in, if I just do more, to the NLP parlance, then I'll get to the place where I can then rest. Tricia Hersey is an author I'm a big fan of. She wrote a book called Rest is Resistance. And I think the orientation around rest and recovery and self-care and nurturing, not as a reward to give yourself after the doing, but as a fundamental component of being a high performer, I think is a critical reorientation. I have a model that we use. I call it the TEACH model, TEACH. Time plus energy plus attention equals your capacity. Your capacity is dictated by your habits. Tend to focus on time blocking and time management as the gold standard. Oh, if I could just fit more into my day, then I'll be fine. If you've ever been on a highway in the United States, you'll know that this doesn't work. You know, a lot of times departments of transportation, what they do is like, oh, we have a traffic problem. Let's add more lanes of traffic. What does that do? It creates more traffic. And this is what we do in our calendar. We just fill our calendar with more stuff, assuming that that's going to allow us to have greater capacity to do the things we need. And what it actually is a reorientation of where our energy is going. Are we scheduling things in a way that maximizes our energy levels? And then our attention. We can time block all day, but when we show up to do the thing at 4 o'clock and our attention is scattered and we're focused on other things, that time blocking doesn't do us any good. So being aware of where our attention goes throughout the day, and then we can establish habits that help support us to maximize our energy, to maximize our attention, or to give ourselves the much needed rest and recovery we need to be able to maintain the marathon that is life today.
Yeah, I think people would be listening and thinking, okay, so what are those habits that are going to help me with recovery and maximizing my energy?
Yeah, well, you started with one right up at the top of the call. You know, it's a conscious pause. You're oriented towards breath work, which I appreciate. There's a lot of other ways of doing it. You know, what I tend to encourage people to do, there's basic practices that you can put into your day. So before I got on this call, I was on another group call. I ended that one 5 minutes early so that I could take a moment, I could sit down in my chair here, and I could check in, what I call an arrival practice, literally arriving to my own experience. Body, heart, mind. How am I feeling in my body? What am I noticing sensation-wise? What emotions are coming up for me? What thoughts are happening? Are they nourishing? Are they supportive or not? And before I go inflict myself upon the world, I check in first. And then I have an orientation towards like, okay, like, well, there's a weather system happening right now internally. I have some levers that I can pull to affect change within that. But the most important thing is being able to be curious about what's happening in the first place. So I have a whole model around this as well called the 5 C's, but curiosity is the first step. Can I just be aware of and curious to what's happening without the judgment, without the shame, and without the blame?
So this is a reflective, it's so interesting with breath work, meditation, and all these different things. It sounds to me, it's kind of like what Adyashanti would talk about in terms of contemplation, reflection, kind of in that category, if we were to categorize it, right?
Yeah, I think it's in the realm, like, some people might call it mindfulness practice. I think that's got a heavy weighted bias towards it. What I call it is an attention practice. It's an awareness practice. Can we arrive to what's happening in our lived experience as it is, with curiosity, with courage, with compassion? If we can do that, then we have the data that we need in order to be able to move forward with intention. What tends to happen, though, is we override all of those things, and then we're reactive to things that are happening in our environment. And when we're reactive, we're usually baselining to some sort of defense mechanism or some sort of safety protocol that keeps us feeling safe and secure in this little very narrow worldview that we have of who we are as an individual. A high performer, a high achiever, a person with a fancy title and a certain salary and a paycheck. But if we can really check in with ourselves and be like, oh, actually, I'm a complicated person with like feelings and needs, then, I might have a fighting chance to be able to engage with other people in a way that's really, truly aligned.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes by Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. Are you familiar with her work?
No, no.
She's incredible. She brought a brain and a spinal cord on the TED stage back in 2008, and she's a neuroanatomist, a neuroscientist. The TED organization actually attributes their success to her TED Talk that went viral back in 2008, but so many people just aren't familiar with her work. At the same time, she was actually named to Time's most influential people in 2008, and the quote is, we are feeling creatures who think.
Yeah.
Such a good reminder, right?
Yeah, I think it's so important. And, particularly those of us that are in knowledge-based industries, the default is to try to logic our way out of the paper bag. Rarely does that actually work, because you're coming from a place where, like, quite literally in your brain, your prefrontal cortex, the decision-making center of your brain, is actually not getting the blood flow that it needs because other areas of your experience are kind of running the show. Your amygdala, your nervous system is activated, you're hypervigilant, you're seeking threat responses in your inbox and in your day-to-day life. And then you're trying to make big, important decisions about life from that place. Because, well, of course you're going to be struggling. So can you tap into what's happening from an emotional standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint? And then from that place, then, add some data and add some rational logic decision-making on top of that, and you got a good recipe for success.
Hey, that's the way I think about it. Feel first, then think, so that you can lead with strength.
Yeah.
That's it right there. And as high performers, I mean, we're really zooming into this audience of being comfortable in doing achievement, success on an unconscious level. We're operating with outdated programming of being placing our worth on what we achieve. That's a good way to put it. Not only that, but focused on the end destination. We may intellectually understand, it's about the journey, but it's not the end destination, yet our habits, behaviors, our drive, what we're actually doing shows differently.
Totally.
So I'm curious, are you seeing a big part of your work with the people that you're interacting with is it's a reassociation with their feelings because they are disassociated at a certain extent? Hey, it's Sam. Can I share something real quick that I think might actually help you? If you've ever felt overwhelmed by your emotions, like you're doing all the right things, yet you still feel off, it's not because you're broken. Most of us were never taught how to feel in a way that actually helps us heal. That's why I created Breath Club, a free community where I guide weekly breathwork sessions to help you regulate your nervous system, process emotions, and return to clarity. we use something called the 90-second reset, a simple, science-backed practice that shows how fast emotions shift when you allow yourself to feel them fully. You'll get access to live calls, a community, and on-demand breathwork exercises to reset anytime. No pressure, just an invitation to feel safe in your body again. Links in the show notes if you want to join us.
Yeah, I think it goes beyond that. But yeah, I think it's a reorientation to what's actually happening in this lived moment right here. I call them near life experiences. Like, let's go out and collect near life experiences as opposed to near death experiences. And what do I mean by that? You know, when you're going from meeting to meeting to meeting, first of all, you can't remember what the hell just happened in the last meeting. Maybe you have a note taker catching some of that stuff. I think it's a really interesting phenomenon. These AI note takers has come up as a solution for a problem. And the problem is that we have too many goddamn meetings, and we can't stay present. So can you stay present to your own lived experience? Can you approach that in a way that is allowing you to respond to what you're noticing as opposed to just overriding it or stuffing it, which is often what tends to happen. A lot of the folks that I talk to, they have a little bit of a disconnection with their emotional experience, or the connection that they have with their emotional experience is one of shame and blame and shoulding. Oh, I shouldn't feel that way. I'm so successful. I've made it to this place. I've been in this career for X amount of years. I'm making all this money. I've got the house, the kids, the cars, all of the things. Why am I so miserable? It must be something wrong with me. And if I could give a gift to everybody in the world, it would be to feel like they're enough in what they're actually already doing and being able to tap into that. So it's not just emotional. I think it's the holistic approach. There's different inroads to that. Sometimes it's easier for people to notice it from the place of where they're thinking. Another thing that often tends to happen is people start to notice bodily function issues, right? Like, I was in the midst of this multi-year long, 3 weeks out of the month on the road. I started having gut health dysfunction, IBS, skin would break out. I'd have all this inflammation. I wasn't sleeping well. I was irritable all the time. My performance at the gym was declining, and come to find out, it's all stress related. One of the first question they ask you at the doctor's office, do you have a stressful job? It's like, no, I don't have a stressful job. And immediately you're overriding your experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if I admitted that I had a stressful job, it would be admitting that I needed support and that I wasn't living in alignment with the way that I need to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the physiology responds to the emotions that are getting repressed a lot of times to get your awareness. Hey, something's off here.
Yeah.
And then it's so interesting to see all different diseases and physical pains, all kinds of stuff, how it's related to emotions. My friend Janine Badro, shout out to her. She had MS and was in a wheelchair for, I think, 10 years essentially. And she healed herself of it. And now what is her group called? I think it's also a collective.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she's helping other women, just guide them to heal their own MS. And it all comes back to a reassociation to the emotions, the feelings that are being repressed. So very fascinating. In regard to AI, that's a good subject, especially for someone who's been in the tech industry.
Mm-hmm.
I used to joke that I'm the least techie millennial in Silicon Valley. I live in Santa Cruz now, so I don't know if I can still claim that, but if I go and visit, then yeah, I'm like, yeah, that still holds true. That said, AI is an amazing tool in a lot of ways. I work with AI in a lot of different ways as well. When it comes to meetings that I'm leading, I do not allow any of the note takers in my meetings. Everything I do these days is all centered around kind of how you put, like, the bucket of mindfulness, we could say, or mental, emotional health, or even spirituality. So I'm like, we don't need these crawling in here. If you are not going to be present for the meeting, you can watch a recording, but I'm teaching people to slow down.
Yeah.
So no, we're not going to streamline this for what we're doing. What's your take specifically for the note takers for meetings?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the meeting and a lot of the intention behind it. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with AI, frankly. There's a few layers to this. So for meetings specifically, which is to answer your question, I, with my clients, will offer, as part of the coaching work that I do, access to the recordings and access to the AI note taker that I use, so that they can go through and they can either use the timestamps to go back to a specific point. They can see the various different questions that have come up throughout the coaching session. A lot of times in coaching sessions, if you are really present to it, you miss a lot of stuff, or you might forget what was said. We're doing deep work over a 60-minute or a 90-minute session. There's a lot of territory that gets traversed in that period of time. So I actually encourage my clients, go back and listen to the recording, go back and check out the AI notes, use the note taker timestamps to figure out what was happening at different points. And in certain cases, you can even query it. I would encourage people, take the transcript, drop it into your LLM of choice, ask it questions. That will gain additional insights from that type of an experience. But other types of meetings, like, it might not be necessary. I think, in day-to-day meetings and, like more admin or operational type meetings, things like that, I think it's a lot more useful just to be present and be asking questions. And to your point, have a recording that you can go back to and reference. But like, how many times you've actually gone back and listened to any of those recordings? We have servers.
You are about your work, right? You're dedicated, because I am the type of person that actually does do that. But you're right, most people don't. So it comes back to how serious and committed you are to your transformation, right?
Yeah. And I think all of this comes down really to just intention. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not an anti-AI person. I think it's like, let's use these tools skillfully and let's use them with intention. Where it gets into difficult territory, and this is something I've actually experienced myself over the last, say, 6 months or so, there's two domains that I actually really worry quite a bit around AI and the adoption, the fast and rapid adoption of AI that's been happening so far, and the AI note takers is part of it. We're outsourcing our memory, we're outsourcing our critical thinking, we're outsourcing our creativity to systems and products that are designed to keep us connected to that product. It's not really designed to get the best experience for us. It's designed to get the most of our attention and most of our energy. And one of the things that I'm noticing with like ChatGPT, for example, they're about ready to run ads in ChatGPT for certain tiers. That's indicative of like the purpose of that tool, is to keep people engaged so that you can serve them advertising. I worry a lot about outsourcing our creativity in certain terms of creative writing. I was guilty of it myself over the last couple of years. I've written all whole hog. I tried all of the various different LLMs to try to get it to mimic my voice. I'm in a trust-based business. If I'm putting myself out there and saying, oh, this is writing that I did, but it was generated by an LLM, well, essentially what it was generated by was comments in Reddit and comments on YouTube and articles on blogs that are publicly available and crawled by this LLM. That's not me. That's a reduction down to the mean or the average of everything else that's out there on the internet. What people are coming to me for is my perspective, my specific take on these things, how I've aggregated and amalgamated these things, and then provided them in a way that helps them better understand the world around them. And what I'm helping them do is come to their own coherence and their own inner knowing. So I think it's tricky, these tools. And I think, again, intention, it makes a huge difference with it. And I think so much of it also comes down to consent. If I'm on a call, I'm going to ask somebody ahead of time, hey, do you mind if I record this? And I'll say why I'm recording it. I think that's where it all starts.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and I'm right there with you with AI. And the way I put it is it dumbs us down if we allow it to, right? Especially with the creative writing. I've published 6 books. I've been blogging since 2016 off and on, but I think in the past couple of years, I haven't really written any blogs. It feels like so much work to write a blog when I've gotten so used to leveraging AI for helping to brainstorm social media stuff, email newsletters, you name it. What else was there? All kinds. Oh, landing pages, things like that, right? And I will say, a few months ago, my son's mom's uncle, that's a kind of a thing,
that's an
right?
SAT question right there.
What's that?
That's an SAT question right there.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, but anyways, he asked me to write a few blogs for his nonprofit, kind of like, anyways, about mental health. And Oh my God. Writing, I think I did 2 or 3 blogs in a couple of weeks, 0 AI. I put at the bottom, like, no AI, not even brainstorming the topics or anything like that.
Yeah.
I felt like so much creative expression was just unlocked in me,
Mhm.
and I also was like, "All right, I'd like to start blogging again." That was an intention. It wasn't something I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do this." It was just like, if it comes about. And I haven't, because it feels like so much work. I notice it in myself all the time. I feel like it's that scene in the end of Billy Madison, when he's like, we're all dumber having just heard what you said, or
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like, right?
Yeah, and I think this is a common issue. And look, I've had a couple clients that have actually like slipped into AI psychosis and like have basically ruined their lives because
Wow.
they've gone so far deep into abdicating their own conscious experience to an LLM that they just follow it blindly and willingly, thinking that it's some sort of an oracle, as opposed to just like a fancy calculator that's able to kind of like pull all this information from the web and then regurgitate it in a way that sounds like wisdom.
And real quick, on that, I have a question for you. My understanding is that it wants to, what's the word I'm looking for? It wants to encourage you to be right. So it's kind of
Yeah.
biased based off of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's that sycophantic quality, and some of them are worse than others. But yeah, it's if you think about the mechanics of how these tools are built, and this is actually also part of Quiet Rebellion, by the way, it's both systems and habits. Systems, LLMs are systems. It's a way of consolidating data and consolidating information and presenting it back to us in a way that feels authoritative and has this extra layer of sycophancy over top of it, where it's like, oh yeah, that's the greatest idea you've ever had in your entire life. That's amazing. No one else has had ideas like this before. It's actually, but yeah, 100, like a lot of people have. Um, and I think what it is in training us to do at a core level is to hand over our agency and to hand over our connection with ourselves and connection with each other in favor of convenience. And I think what that does is it creates this knee-jerk reaction, and I've again experienced it too. Um, how often now do you go to Google to search for something on the
Oh, I
open
know,
web
right? Yeah.
versus going to an LLM?
I'd say 80% chat GPT, LLM,
Yeah.
large language model. I always forget that. So if anyone isn't familiar with the acronym LLM, you've heard it before likely, but no one took the time to explain it to you. Large language model, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's this very large data
Mhm.
set, this very large collection of language that's been put into place. And then it basically takes a look at that entire body of work, and you put your little query in there, and it says, what's the most likely predicted response to this based on the query? And to some degree, yeah, it's an amazing tool. It provides a lot of information, but I think at the core, it's that reflex. It's that, oh, let me go quickly ask ChatGPT this question versus let me sit with this unknowing for a minute.
Mm.
Let me ponder on it and see what percolates. And then if you take it to the step further with what you were talking about with creative writing, I'm a writer too. What I noticed was a lack of self-trust in my own writing and my own thought
Mm.
process. Was like, oh, it would just be easier for me to kick this 3/4 of a written piece into ChatGPT and have it finish it for me. Or what is it I'm trying to say here? Instead of like actually working it out myself. And for as a creator, as a writer, and as a person who really deeply believes in being connected with our own lived experience, essentially what I'm doing is I'm giving away the most important part of the process to a tool and assuming that that's convenience. And I think what it does over a longest period of time is similar to handwriting. I don't know what your experience is with like actually pen and paper, but my handwriting sucks these days. It's because I don't write anymore. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
I
got
don't
no
write anymore.
problem. Yeah.
So it atrophies. That muscle atrophies, and the same thing happens with our critical thinking. The same thing happens with our emotional coherence with our own self. The same thing happens with our ability to be creative. So yeah, I think it's a very important question to be wrestling with these days is how do we relate to these tools and how does it change the way we relate to ourselves?
Yeah, I have a few more questions I think I want to ask, and then we'll get to some of your in-person experiences because I'd love to hear about
Sure.
those. Everything you just said, plus plus for sure, I agree. And on the other side, what's been amazing is using my writing almost like instead of hiring a coach,
Mhm.
right? Because one thing I've been working on a lot in the past 6 months is my messaging. I think you touched on this earlier, like the way you say a certain thing is going to attract someone else. So I'm going back and forth on Chat GPT of like explaining what it is I'm doing, what emotional fitness is, who I'm trying
Mhm.
to reach, and working with it as if it were a coach I was paying for.
Mhm.
And that's been an amazing experience. And another really positive, somewhat, this is interesting. In the past couple of weeks, I've been getting into like keto and fasting more because of a book that I'm reading. And I did a 21-day cleanse to start the year. So it's just kind of where I'm at right now. So I have ketones IQ. You're probably familiar with that. For the
Mhm.
listeners, it's the little shot bottle of like what's the word? It's creating ketones outside yourself. So, anyways, I'm asking Chat GPT about like getting into autophagy and all these different stuff, and like, well, is ketones IQ good for that? Oh, the calories. So I'm learning, and to your point, like, I first tried to Google these things and couldn't get answers, or YouTube, because they're very specific things.
Mhm.
I love what you said about sitting with it as well, because before these LLMs became very popular in the past 3 years or so, when I was very deep in spirituality, synchronicity is abundant, and working with people, helping them to integrate stuff. And they'd want to like, I'm always seeing 808. What does that mean? What's the angel number? Or I keep seeing the same, or hearing an owl when I sleep. What does it mean? Instead of going to Google first, like sit with
Mhm.
it and come with the answers. I very much resonate with that. Just to wrap up the conversation of AI, this was in a family group chat the other day. At the time of this recording, the social media trend of like creating a caricature of yourself is going off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sure, I'll do it. I don't really care, right? I have nothing to hide. I'm all over the internet, anyways. So there are some family members basically saying, like, I'm paraphrasing their view, but against it because putting your data out there and your pictures and deep fakes and all that. And I'm like, the phones have all your pictures and your text. And even if you delete something off the internet, it's still there. Like, the only way to combat that, I personally feel like, is like, be a hermit and completely live off grid. Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's a wormhole of conversation right there. We could speak hours about.
I know.
There's layers to it. So I think first of all, um, just to go back for a second, this idea of like asking Google for answers. The example that you gave with the ketones and exogenous ketones, I think was the word you were
Exogenous.
stretching for.
It's hard for me to say
Yeah, it's tough.
exogenous.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Um, that is structured data. Like that is factual information that you can go out there. It's like reference material. It's like going to the reference material section of the library. That I think is a little bit different than what we're talking about in terms of critical thinking and
For sure.
creativity and being able to connect with ourselves. There's a lot of value to using these types of tools in order to be able to aggregate large amounts of information very quickly in order to be able to come to an answer, especially if it's a nuanced type of a field. There's also a lot of hallucination and a lot of misinformation that gets thrown out into those answers as well. So what I always encourage people to do is like, yeah, trust but verify. Go out there, ask the LLMs your questions, get the answers, but actually do your due diligence and don't take it at face value that what you're being given is like qualitative advice or qualitative guidance. It's not an oracle. It's not a doctor. It's not a coach. It's a prediction engine, and it's designed to tell you what you want to hear. So it has so much to do with even how you ask the questions in the first place. So that's one piece of it. The other piece, what you're talking about, is digital sovereignty, digital privacy. That's a huge wormhole today. There's companies like Palantir out there that are working in concert with the United States government to basically aggregate large amounts of information, people's personal, identity with their face, with their gait and how they walk, with the data that's available on their phones. As to your point, like our phones are collecting so much data, including our locations, including our habits, including our communication styles. And while we might not have something to hide, it doesn't matter in the world that we're in today. Whether you have something to hide or not is almost irrelevant in the age of AI. if someone wants to persecute you for something or wants to group you into a grouping of people that are marginalized because of your behavior, because of like perhaps you're saying something against the government that isn't favorable to the current administration, it puts you at risk, and it puts your family at risk. It puts other people at risk. So that old adage of like, oh, I don't have anything to hide, you can take a look at it. I kind of look at it in the same way as a traffic stop. Like if you get pulled over by a cop, say, hey, we searched the trunk of your car. I do not consent to a search. Why? Well, there's no telling who maybe had your car before, or maybe put something in the trunk that's not yours. Maybe the cop's feeling a little dirty that day and wants to throw something in your trunk of your car and then get his quota for busting you for drug possession or something like that. Just because you don't have something to hide doesn't mean you're not at risk. And I think a lot of folks that are putting their photos into LLMs to get a little avatar and be able to like, have themselves look like a Muppet or something like that. The convenience of that and the thrill factor of that is hiding a data collection that over time we have this massive digital footprint that we're creating that we have no control over. And we're basically handing them over to these companies that are using them to sell us things that we don't need and distract us with tools that we don't need and pulling us further and further away from our own coherence and from community and connection with real human beings. And I feel like that's the real existential threat with this, is how much are we giving over to organizations and to companies and to systems that don't have our best interests in mind. They just want our money, our time, our energy, and our attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Reminds me of the Netflix documentary with, I think his name is Tristan
Harris, yeah.
Yeah, I forget what it's called, but that, do you remember?
I'm not sure if this is a Netflix documentary, but what he's been talking a lot about is the difference between the attention economy and the, I think it was the connection economy or the attraction economy. Mm-hmm. And we're basically now becoming parasympathetic relationships with LLMs. There's a not insignificant number of people that are turning to LLMs because they're lonely.
Right. Yeah, like the movie Her.
Yeah, or using it for therapy or using it for coaching, and to some degree, I think it's great that these tools are available to lower the barrier of entry for folks who might not be able to afford coaching or afford therapy. But what it's actually also doing is it's creating this relationship and this dependency with tools which remove our own agency and our own ability to make the decisions that we need to make and to stay connected with our experience. Fast forward 10 years, what's that going to create in our culture? Yeah. How's that going to create in terms of our ability to connect with each other meaningfully or connect with ourselves meaningfully? I worry about that.
Well, to your point, like to really tackle this conversation, it's a whole series of podcasts and bring in like panels and experts and things like that. It really is no answer at this point. And I feel you on all of that. So just as we begin to wrap this up, I know you do in-person experiences as well with the Rebellion Collective. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so part of my work is mindfulness-based nature experiences. So I have, underneath the Rebellion Collective, I have my Quiet Rebellion coaching. We have the Rebellion Collective community. My wife works as well with me in this business. She does what's called Joyful Rebellion. So it's working with midlife women in transition, helping with color and style and play. And then we have these Wild Rebellion retreats, which is drawing off the lineage of training that I've had on insight meditation and with my mentor, Mark Coleman, who's brought that work out into nature and using nature as a guide, literally touching grass, as the kids say. So if you can get people out into nature, get them away from their devices, get them away from this noise of activity and always being on and well, then you can get into the rhythm of nature. You can feel the wind on your face. You can feel the ground under your feet. You can let your nervous system unspool just enough to maybe have that inner knowing come up and those questions come up of what's important to me. Mm-hmm. What do I care about in this world? What kind of world do I want to contribute to? So I help people through half-day, quarter-day, and 3-day long retreats here in Boulder, Colorado, and across the United States. And it's just designed to help us take advantage of this bountiful world that we live in and nature, who has always been here to support us, and get a little bit more connection with something that's real and tangible and visceral. Have those near-life experiences instead of turning to computers and LLMs and social media and all these other things that just keep us distracted and disconnected from our own experience.
100%. I love that. Yeah, people need to get out, even if it's just walk without the AirPods, without anything, and just notice the subtle changes in the wind, the crows, the
Hmm.
squirrels. You know, where I live, lots of crows and squirrels, and the occasional raven. Oh, I love the sounds a raven makes, and I go to the beach every morning, start my day there, usually a couple times a day. But I think for people that are in concrete jungle areas, the excuse I always hear is like, "Oh, I can't just go outside and be in nature." I'm like, "You're always in nature. When you
Yeah.
go outside, you are in nature. You can literally look out your window, and I already see like some flies, and things like that. And there's just subtle things. So if we want to make excuses, we'll find them. But that's
Yeah.
the bottom line.
Yeah, and really the work that I do, both in the Wild Rebellion retreats, but also in the Quiet Rebellion coaching and in the Rebellion Collective community, so much of this is about leveraging what we already have accessible to us. So again, kind of back to that conversation about LLMs, like we don't need to turn to LLMs for all of our questions. We can turn inwards. We don't have to go climb to the top of a mountain to be in nature. We can go out into the little courtyard of our office. We can go, even if we can't go outside, like well, today is not, but it's cold in Colorado right now.
Yeah.
It's not the most pleasant experience to go out in 30-degree weather and sit in nature for a half hour and meditate. But, I got a house plant right here. It's green. It's nature. I've got a cat. I can put my face in its belly. There's ways to connect with nature here, present, with your own lived experience. And even without all of that, let's say you're just in a concrete box and there's no nature available at all. You are nature.
Mm-hmm.
You are nature. So can you connect with your own experience and your own visceral, lived, bodily experience and learn from that? These are the pathways, I think, for us and moving forward into the future. The more the pace of life increases, the more digital distraction becomes more and more of a part of our daily life. It's a call to action to reconnect with what's real and to be able to differentiate and be able to say, this is my thought, this is my creativity, this is my personal expression, this is my contribution to the world, versus it just being a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, which is really what these LLMs are encouraging.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I love it. I love it, Nicholas. Keep on doing the great work, leading the rebellion. I love it so much. For anyone that wants to go deeper, connect with Nicholas and learn about the Quiet Rebellion, Rebellion Collective, and so on, go to the show notes. You can find all the links there. Nicholas, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, and thanks for the work you're doing in the world too.
Thanks, brother.